Hello, and welcome back to Grave Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered straight from the grave, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. Electric wall lamps guide me down the hall to my room. The carpet runner makes a soft hush under my shoes as I drag my suitcase along. It's a heavy old thing. Brass corners, hard fiber sides, built like it expects rough handling. The corridor is empty, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels like it's holding its breath. Adds up to 8, I murmur, tapping the number plate on my door. The thought hits me out of nowhere that someone might be watching through the peephole. I stare at it for a second too long. Then I unlock the door and go in. I switch on the lights and lock up fast. Chain latch, too. I don't take chances in places like this. The room is a plain single. Comfortable enough, but barely personal. A bed with a stiff white coverlet, a desk, a little bureau. Furniture that could have been dropped here from any other hotel in any city, and nobody would notice. No character, no warmth. Just a place where people sleep and leave. I set my suitcase down gently on the carpet. Not because I respect hotel property, but because I'm afraid of breaking what's inside and making my night even worse. My wool coat and fedora go onto the bed. I loosen my tie. I roll my shoulders and swing my arms out like I'm waking up my muscles. That's all the stalling I'll allow myself. I pop the latches on the suitcase. No clothes, no shaving kit, no spare socks. Instead, there's a stack of mirrors wrapped in blankets, an iron nail for each mirror, and a hammer. I pause and listen, half expecting a knock on the door or the muffled voice of a manager telling me to stop making noise. No one comes. So I get to work. I measure by instinct, pacing the walls and hammering nails into plaster at about 7-foot intervals. The dull thud of the hammer feels too loud in the quiet room. I keep my hits controlled, not sloppy. If someone hears, I want it to sound like simple maintenance, not like I'm building a trap. Once the nails are in, I unwrap the mirrors. They're all different shapes and sizes. Weird and irregular, like broken pieces that were never part of the same original. Some are oval, some are jagged, some curve in ways glass shouldn't curve. No two are identical. I hang them around the room at eye level so that when I stand in the center, I'm surrounded on every side by my own reflection, split and warped and multiplied. I squeeze my eyes shut and force moisture back into them. I've been awake for more than 40 hours. My head feels stuffed with cotton, and my body wants to collapse. But this isn't the kind of work you do half asleep. If I lose focus, I lose more than pride. I turn off the lights. Darkness falls instantly. But the mirrors don't stay dark. They pick up the faint spill of city light through the curtains. And for a moment, they look like small pools of gray water hanging in the air. I take a deep breath and draw a spiral in the air with my finger, small at first, then wider, steady clockwise. I spread my fingers and let the exhale empty my lungs completely, pushing the last bit of breath out until my chest feels hollow. The air shifts. A tingling rolls out from my skin, like static moving under the surface. It pushes outward, through the walls into the bones of the Fastigium Hotel itself. I feel it thread into insulation, climb into the attic, skim across slate-gray roof tiles. At the same time, it drops downward through floors into the basement, then into the concrete foundation, up and down all at once, like my sense of self has become a net. It's not sight, not hearing, not smell. It's a kind of mapping, like echolocation, but for rooms, for people, for fear. Information arrives through the top of my head in quick flashes. The Fastigium might as well be made of glass. Every door is thin. Every wall is pretend. I see a heavy woman in one room doing something I don't want to describe in detail. Something humiliating and private and wrong, while her son watches, horrified, chewing on bread like it's the only thing keeping him from screaming. I see a desperate vacuum salesman in another room, sweating and shaking, rattling pills in his hand. Bichloride of mercury. He's working himself up to swallow them all and step out of his body like he thinks death is a clean exit. If I had more time, I'd go to his door and pound until my fists were raw. I'd tell him, if you're going to do it, don't do it here. Hotels like this collect misery the way drains collect hair. The Fastigium has a taste for it. Go somewhere open, somewhere honest. A mountaintop, a cliff, a place with wind that can carry you away. You don't escape yourself by leaving your body behind. But I don't have time to be a hero tonight. I brush past, sobbing, laughing, whispering, moaning. Auras flare in my mind like colored smoke. I taste emotion as if it has texture, grief that clings, lust that sticks, anger that crackles, shame that feels cold. I drift through singles and doubles and suites and feel bodily fluids and breath and sweat like waves slapping against me. And then I feel something else, a pressure, a slow tightening, like a giant hand closing around the building, something aware, not a person, not a ghost in the usual sense. More like the hotel itself has a mind made from everything that ever happened inside it. A genius loci, a place spirit shaped out of stolen life force. As my awareness expands, it notices me. There are things that feed on psychics. I've just lit up like a neon sign. No time to admire the danger. The mirrors brighten on their own as if someone switched on lights behind them. Images flicker inside, faces, one after another like a rapid flip book. Some are living, some are dead, some are half-formed. They replace each other so fast their features nearly blur into mud. Then the slideshow stops. One face remains. It isn't a face the way humans mean it. It's more like an idea of a face. A smooth porcelain oval, almost featureless, with only two shallow indentations where eyes should be. Around it, shadows move in thin tendrils, undulating like smoke underwater. I've seen it before. In dreams lately. The Fastigium Hotel. Corpses walking like they're late for something, and that pale mask floating in the middle of it all. The thing behind the mask is why I came here from Los Angeles. A demoness wearing the shape of a woman who'd been burned and cut open and beaten until her body was more damaged than flesh. In the dream where we made the deal, I shook her hand. She was missing two fingers. I remember the feel of her skin like it wasn't quite skin. There you are, I say, as if I'm happy to see her. I was starting to think you stood me up. You came, she answers. Her voice doesn't travel through the air. It doesn't enter my ears. It unspools directly in my head, thick and oily, Wrong in a way that makes my stomach tighten. I'm a man of my word, I say. Miss, what did you tell me your name was again? Over the ages, every name meant to shrink me has been used, she replies. I have swallowed every insult. That's beautiful, I say. But I need something I can actually say without feeling like I'm reading a sermon. How about Mora? A pause. Then, if you must. Great. Now, Mora, we can flirt later. The deal is still the deal, right? I get you out of this place, and you give me what you promised. Our terms remain. And then you go back to whatever cursed dictionary you crawled out of, I say, keeping my tone light because fear likes seriousness. How'd you get trapped here anyway? Extreme trauma calls me, she says. And the fastigium is soaked in it. Before its opening night disembowelment, before even the construction accident that killed its first owner, this ground had been drinking blood for a long time. Long before the hotel, long before the town. Echoes of suffering remained. They gathered. They formed a crude mind. The hotel became their cage. Astral energy powers this place, and beings like me are made of that substance. The dead here seized me, reduced me, played with me. I understood the danger too late. It's never simple, I mutter. So how am I supposed to get you out? Let me into your body, she says. We walk out together. Once we leave the hotel's reach, I can safely step out of you. I freeze. Possession? You didn't mention that part. I will not act through you unless it's required, she answers. But move quickly. The hotel is aware of you. It wants you. The longer you stay, the harder it will be to leave. I let out a deep breath. I must be out of my mind. Fine. What are you waiting for? Get in. You speak to only a shred of me, she says. My whole self can only be gathered through my emblem. Your emblem, I repeat. That mask? It is a reminder, she says. A face for the faceless. And that's what I'm supposed to retrieve. Yes. Okay, I say, forcing confidence into my voice. Where is it? Under a bed? In a toilet? Behind a bar next to a bottle I could really use right now? At this moment, she says. It is in the Fastigium's ballroom. Ballroom, I echo. That's just perfect. I should have packed a tux. No response. Of course not. I pull the mirrors down fast. I yank the nails out. I wrap everything back into blankets and shove it into the suitcase. Coat and hat back on. I wish, for half a second, that I could sleep. I haven't even touched the bed. Then I step into the hallway. The lighting is the same. The carpet is the same. But something is off. In my peripheral vision, I have too many shadows. 12 of them. 6 on the wall to my right, 6 on my left. They move wrong, too dramatic, arms and legs bending as if they're sprinting in the slow motion. They don't match my steps. They match my fear. I pass an underfed chambermaid in a dark dress with a pale cap and apron. She doesn't look at me. She doesn't look at the shadows either. Good evening, sir, she mutters, eyes down. I want to grab her arm and ask if she can see what I see. I don't. People who work in places like this learn what not to notice. I reach the ballroom. There's a chain across the entrance like a weak attempt at control. No one standing there. No guard, no staff, no velvet rope with a polite sign. I step over the chain, then drag my suitcase under it. My shoes land on polished hardwood. The room is huge, open, echoing, and the first thing I notice is the windows. They don't agree with each other. Through some, it's day. Sunny sky over mountains, crisp and clear. Through others, it's night. Clouded, moonless, heavy. The mismatch makes my jaw clench. My brain doesn't like that kind of contradiction. It feels like the room is lying and my body is paying attention, even if my mind tries not to. Music pulls my eyes toward the bandstand. A jazz band in tuxedos plays fast, bright, relentless. Horns, woodwinds, piano, drums. The tempo is cheerful in a way that feels aggressive. The musicians sweat hard, but the dancers sweat more. Pale men and women spinning, kicking, swinging their arms, grinning like they've forgotten how to stop. Flappers with bobbed hair whirl in black sequin dresses. Some wear little cocaine boxes on chains like accessories. Gangsters in double-breasted suits lean against walls, puffed up with their own importance, guns bulging under fabric. Rich men and poor imposters mixed together, all pretending they belong. There are talkers and schemers and drunks and people with desperate eyes trying to become somebody by being near somebody. It's a perfect picture of a decade that never really died. And yet I don't see the porcelain mask. Tables sit empty along the sides, pushed back to make room for the dance floor. I pick one and sit, suitcase at my feet. I try to think. If I start asking people about a missing mask, will that draw attention? If I order whiskey, will it buy me time or trap me here? The air feels thick, like the room is breathing through everyone's mouths. A hand grips my shoulder. I nearly jump out of my skin. Leaving or arriving? A voice asks softly near my ear. Why don't you take off the coat and hat and stay a while? I turn in my chair. A small man stands beside me, pale to the point of looking unreal, as if sunlight has never touched him, and he's proud of that. His eyes are bright and sharp. The name's Hudson Hunkel, he says. I own this establishment. I stand and shake his hand. His grip is dry and firm. Congratulations, I say. Is it always this lively? He smiles like he's heard that question 1,000 times. We've seen excitement, certainly. But with Prohibition arriving in just a few days, the atmosphere has been heightened. By the time the feds come knocking, I say, this crowd will have drained every bottle you've got. Hudson's smile doesn't move his eyes. I wouldn't be so sure. Our hotel is more accommodating than you might think. Accommodating, I repeat. Maybe you can help me then. I misplaced something. A special white mask. Have you seen one? He tilts his head. We hosted a masked ball some months ago. Were you here then, mister? I just dropped it, I cut in. It has to be in this ballroom. Hudson looks past me at the crowd like he's watching a private joke unfold. This is a friendly bunch once you get to know them. Would you like me to escort you? Make introductions? I force a smile. That would be great, Hudson. You're a lifesaver. Then let's begin, he says. And I catch the quick side glance he gives me, like he's checking whether I'm ripe yet. He walks me through the crowd. In fast succession, I shake hands with people who claim to be boxers, actors, pilots, reporters, beauty queens, union men, racketeers. Some faces feel familiar, like I've seen them in old photos. Others feel like I should know them, but can't place them. We exchange quick, shallow talk, and each time I ask about the mask, I get shrugs and smiles that don't reach eyes. At one point, I meet a maintenance man dressed like a millionaire, talking like old money. Who's watching over the place while you socialize, I ask, half joking. He smiles without warmth. Who's to say the fastigium isn't watching over us? The words hit my spine like cold water. And then finally, I see it. A pale oval raised in the air like a prize. A flapper is dancing with wild energy, kicking her heels up as if the floor is on fire. A huge feathered headband bounces with each move. In her hand, she waves the porcelain mask around her face, playing peekaboo with the men staring at her. "Oh," I say, keeping my voice easy. "There it is. Found my lost property." Hudson's smile sharpens. "Wonderful." I start toward her. Up close, her dress is sheer-sleeved with an Art Deco pattern, midnight and deep red, like something pretty built out of warning signs. Her grin is wide, hungry, and careless. "Excuse me," I say, trying to get her attention over the music. She locks eyes with me as if she already knows my name. Without warning, she hands the mask to someone else and flings herself into my arms. "Future husband," she giggles. "Is that you?" Her laugh never stops. It's like her body can't function without it. I try to look past her shoulder and track the mask, but her feather blocks my view, tickling my nose until I fight a sneeze. Her arms are stronger than they should be, latched tight around me. "Come on," she whines. "Dance with me. What are you, all left feet?" She drags me into a dance that's too fast for the rhythm, pushing my body where she wants it. She rests her head on my shoulder and lets out a long breath. The smell that rises from her mouth is wrong. Rotten fish, filth, something like a backed-up drain. My stomach turns. The song ends and I wrench myself free. "Buy a gal a drink," she calls after me, laughing like she said it to 100 men tonight. I shove past a pair of drunken men who start to speak and then only hiccup, almost in sync, eyes glassy. Where did the mask go? I look around, frantic now, and realize another thing. Still, nobody has reacted to my 12 shadows, the ones circling me like numbers on a clock, waving their arms as if desperate for attention. Either they can't see them, or they see them and don't think it's worth mentioning. I swallow hard and hiss under my breath. "All right, point me in the right direction." The shadows respond. They all extend their arms the same way, pointing east across the ballroom. There, held high by a portly, bald old man, is the porcelain mask. He stares into its underside like it's whispering secrets up at him. Relief hits me so hard my knees weaken. I hurry over and snatch it from his grip. "Thank you," I say quickly, forcing politeness. "You found my lost property." The old man blinks as if waking up. "Now see here." I shove cash into his hand. "Next drink's on me, pal." Then I turn to leave. Every dancer has stopped. The band slows like someone dragged a needle across the record of the night. The tempo turns heavy and lazy. The room feels colder. Every pair of eyes is on me. "Where do you think you're going?" demands an older woman in an evening gown the color of fresh blood. As she steps forward, I see her inner arms are carved up, sliced open. Blood runs down, but it evaporates before it hits the floor. Behind her, Hudson lifts his martini and winks at me. And now that the crowd is still, I can see what motion had hidden. Many of them are injured in ways no living person should be walking around with. A prize fighter with a perfectly round hole in his temple and a starburst of bone and blood on the opposite side. A woman with bruises ringed around her neck, tiny broken capillaries like purple freckles. A bloated young man foaming at the mouth. An older lady whose face looks chewed, half-eaten. My skin prickles. Am I the only living person in this room? I talk fast because talking fast sometimes outruns panic. Sorry, I say. I just got word my father's not doing well. Mother's gone. Can't have him dying alone. The flapper with the rotten breath laughs softly. No one dies alone, she says, as if it's a bedtime story. Once you know how things really work, you'll see nobody dies at all. Hands grab at my coat. Someone claws my cheek. My fedora disappears into the press of bodies. The crowd closes in with polite smiles and hungry eyes, tugging at me like I'm a coat they've decided belongs to them. I look down at my extra shadows. They pantomime pressing a mask to their faces. I stare at the porcelain oval in my hand and feel my mouth go dry. I don't know if this will save me or ruin me, but the room is tightening, and I can feel the hotel itself pulling inward like a muscle. Horse feathers, I bark and press the mask to my face. It's colder than ice. Not just cold, empty, like touching the absence of heat. For a split second, it doesn't feel solid. It feels like water that holds shape. Then it sinks into me as if my skin opens to accept it. Inside my head, I hear a voice, smooth with relief. I can escape now. So good to hear from you again, I mutter, because sarcasm is the last shield I own. A punch slams into my ribs and knocks the breath out of me. If I was alone in my body, I'd fold and drop. But now there's something else with me, something that doesn't fear pain the way people do. I hear Mora's horrible chuckle deep in my skull, delighted. My dozen shadows gain weight and substance. They move like workers who know their job. One of them flips open my suitcase. Others scatter my mirrors across the floor. The mirrors slide across the hardwood like stones skipping over still water. Wherever a mirror lands, part of the crowd vanishes, pulled into glass, trapped in silver. Screaming faces press against mirror surfaces from the inside, warping like reflections in a nightmare. In seconds, the ballroom thins. Now only the living remain around me, the ones whose eyes are too clear, whose injuries are only the normal kind. Ooh, a fist swings. I dodge. I swing back. Someone knees me hard, low, and pain flashes white behind my eyes. I bite down on a forearm when it comes too close, teeth sinking into soft flesh. The taste is sweat and salt and panic. It feels like being a kid again, cornered by boys who had nothing better to do than test what you could survive. An elbow catches my right eye. A hot burst of pain, then darkness on that side. I spit blood and turn my head toward Hudson Hunkle, who watches as if he's enjoying theater. Is it too late for a refund? I croak. A path opens, narrow and sudden. I run. Behind me, an insect-like voice shrieks, "Stop him!" Hands clutch at my clothes. Fingernails tear fabric. Someone tries to trip me. I stumble once, then catch myself. My mirrors start to shatter behind me one after another, sharp cracks popping in time with the music as if the band is playing my escape. Then I'm through the front doors. The registration clerk shouts something, stiff-collared and useless. I ignore him and burst outside into air that feels real. It's early evening now. The sky is purple and pink, clouds soft at the edges, like the world is pretending to be peaceful. My car waits where I left it, my battered Model T with oxidized paint and scratches and dents, faithful as an old dog. I get it started and rattle away down the road between steep cliffs, the engine coughing and shaking but holding. No one follows me out. Maybe they can't. Maybe the hotel won't let them. When I reach a scenic turnout, I pull over and park. My hands are shaking so hard I have to grip the steering wheel for a second before I can let go. I climb out and stand in the beams of my headlights. "Well," I say into the empty air, "what are you waiting for? We're out. Consider yourself evicted." Mora does not leave gently. My 12 shadows seize my arms and legs and pin me. Another forces my jaw open. A laugh pours out of my throat, high and cruel, and not mine. Then something pushes up from inside me, hands first, mangled and scarred, then arms, then a head wearing the porcelain mask. My mouth tears at the corners. My gag reflex slams into full panic. I retch and choke, eyes watering, body convulsing as if it's trying to reject the universe. I'm right on the edge of blacking out when the last of her drags free of me. She stands in the headlight glow like a nightmare that learned how to pose. Burned skin, bruised flesh, a stomach cut open, intestines floating as if gravity is optional. My shadows, 11 now, no longer attached to me, cling to her, stroking and grabbing like worshippers hiding her naked damage from my tired eyes. One length of intestine drifts forward and settles on my shoulder. The smell is unbearable, like 1,000 dead places packed into one breath. "In all of human history," she says, her voice now in the air and inside my skull at the same time, "I never required a favor. In honor of your service, you alone will be spared. The lessons of history's greatest torturers will not be passed onto your flesh." "Touching," I rasp. "But we still had an agreement." "It has been paid," she says. "Now I am untethered. I must return to what waits after. Humanity's reckoning's still coming." "Well," I say, swallowing bile, "then what are you waiting for? Go." The intestine slides off my shoulder and retreats back into her. Shadows multiply around her, thickening, darkening, until she's swallowed in black. Somehow the black gets darker, like the night is learning a new shade. I close my eyes for a moment, just long enough to breathe. When I open them again, she's gone. The turnout is quiet. The sky is still purple. My headlights still shine. The road still drops away between cliffs like it always has. I look down. I have only one shadow now, mine. "Well," I whisper, voice raw, "let's see if this works." And the shadow lifts itself off the ground like it's peeling away from the dirt. It grows depth. It becomes a shape. Then it becomes a figure wearing my outline, a dark copy with no face, no features, only form. I reach out and take its hand. It feels solid. Warmth doesn't come from it, but weight does. Reality does. Just like she promised. I climb into the passenger seat of my Model T, too exhausted to keep my eyes open. The last strip of sunlight sits on the horizon like a dying ember. "Drive for a while," I tell my shadow. "I'm overdue for sleep. 40 winks at least." As my eyelids finally drop, I hear the engine turn over again. Steady this time, like something else has learned how to steer my life while I rest. Story 2. I'll start by saying I'm not a tattoo person. I never have been. I hate needles. Even looking at one makes my stomach turn. And I'm always thinking about the worst-case scenario. Someone reusing one, something being dirty, some infection that follows you home. I used to tell people I'd never get a tattoo, not even a tiny one. That doesn't matter anymore because I have one now. I didn't plan it. I didn't choose it. I don't even remember getting it. And I'm saying this as clearly as I can. Something is wrong with it. Not it looks bad wrong. Not my parents will be mad wrong. I mean something is actively, physically wrong. This started last week when my friend AJ met me at a bar after work. It was a normal Friday kind of thing. We were both tired, both stressed, both pretending we weren't getting older. I got there first and already had a couple of beers in me by the time he showed up. The place was loud in that way bars get when the night is just getting started. Music too high, people talking over each other, glasses clinking like the whole room is vibrating. AJ slid into the booth across from me and immediately rolled up his sleeve like he couldn't wait another second. "Check it out," he said. "I finally did it." I stared at him for a second, slow and unfocused, the way you do when you've been drinking and your brain is half a step behind your eyes. "You get a new shirt?" I asked. He sighed like I was the most disappointing person alive. "You're such a lightweight." "Dude, look at my arm." I was halfway into shrugging him off when my eyes finally locked onto what he was pointing at. He had a tattoo on his upper forearm. It was a sun, but not the friendly kind you'd see on a kid's drawing. The shape had a rough, ancient look, like something carved into stone. The lines swirled in a way that made it feel alive. It reminded me of old artwork you see in museums, Greek pottery or some weird symbol from a history book you barely remember. "Congrats," I said, trying to sound supportive. "How interesting." He leaned back, proud of himself. "Come on, man. You always said I'd never do it. And now I did. What do you think?" The noise in the bar was already starting to hammer at my head, but I still tried to form a real opinion. "It's neat." "Oh, screw you," he said, laughing. "You couldn't handle the needle. I know you couldn't." "I wouldn't want to," I told him. "Needles are dirty. They carry diseases. They get infected. I hate them. So no." He smirked. "Pussy." "Bitch," I shot back, and we both laughed in that way guys do when they've been friends too long to be polite. We finished our drinks, and AJ waved down the waitress for another round. While we waited, my eyes kept drifting back to his tattoo. Something about it bothered me, like my eyes couldn't settle on it. At first I thought it was just the alcohol making the lines swim a little. But the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't just a simple sun-out line. "Wait," I said. "Is your sun made of snakes?" AJ grinned and flexed his arm like he was showing off a muscle. "Yeah, cool, right?" "It's creepy," I said. "You work at a bank. Are you trying to scare someone's grandma to death?" "I found it online," he said. "Some old blog. Some conspiracy board stuff." That made sense. AJ always had a thing for weird internet rabbit holes. Even in college, when the rest of us were watching dumb videos just to laugh at them, AJ was the one who would stay up late actually reading the comments, clicking links, getting serious about it. It was one of those traits I'd always filed under harmless AJ nonsense, but the tattoo didn't feel harmless. "What does it mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not totally sure. The guy on the blog said he found it in a book he was translating. I can't remember the language. German? Dutch? Something like that. He said it was connected to some Bronze Age pantheon. Like old gods, ancient stuff." I stared at the snakes curling around the sun's rays. "I'm glad your permanent skin doodle has such deep meaning." "Hey," he said, holding up his beer like he was making a speech. "It's my first one. Give me a break." Then his face changed in that familiar way, like he'd just had an idea and couldn't wait to cause trouble with it. "Why don't you finally get one?" he asked. I laughed. "No." We used to talk about it all the time. Yeah, in college, I said. When we were idiots. You're still an idiot, he said. Come on, get one. No. Bitch ass. We sat there for a while, drinking and letting the night go soft around us. The kind of quiet stretch where the bar noise becomes background and you start thinking less carefully. That's when AJ got that look again. Shot contest? He asked. I need to be clear here. By that point, I was already deep into the night. 5 beers in, on a Friday, no work the next day, feeling bold and stupid and invincible. I wasn't making good decisions. I wasn't even making decisions. I was just following the moment. I remember rum. I remember the burn of it. I remember AJ laughing and slapping the table. I remember bright neon lights smearing in my vision like wet paint. I remember a couple women giving me a look that said I was a disaster. And I remember very clearly a big, burly man with a beard leaning over me, like some kind of troll from a storybook. His face too close, his hands working somewhere near my shoulder. Then nothing. The next thing I knew, I woke up on the floor of my apartment. Not in my bed, not even on my couch, on the floor between my dining area and my living room, with my head on the carpet and the rest of me on tile. My mouth tasted like old pennies. My head felt like it had been filled with sand and shaken. My eyes hurt when I opened them. My back ached in that deep way that makes you think you slept twisted for hours. A J had been sober enough to get me home, apparently, but not kind enough to put me anywhere comfortable. My shirt was on backward. That detail hit me like a slap because it didn't feel like an accident. It felt like evidence. I dragged myself up and stumbled into the bathroom, telling myself I'd shower and rinse the alcohol out of my skin. The mirror was fogging as the water warmed up, and I was halfway through pulling my shirt off when the ache in my back sharpened into something else. A sting high on my right shoulder blade. Not a muscle ache, not soreness. More like a scrape or a burn. I tried to twist and look, but couldn't get the angle. My stomach tightened because some part of me already knew. I grabbed my small shaving mirror from the drawer and angled it behind my shoulder. I used the main bathroom mirror to line them up, like some awkward trick. It took a few tries, and then the image snapped into focus. A tattoo. The same swirling sun AJ had, except it was on my back. The rays were made of thin snakes, their bodies looping into the design. The center of the sun wasn't shaded. It was solid black like a hole. The tips of each flare ended like a snake tail, and the whole thing looked like it was twisting, even though it wasn't. My skin around it was puffy and pink, like it was angry. It looked fresh. I forgot about showering. I grabbed my phone and called AJ, and by the time he picked up, I was already swearing so hard my voice cracked. He laughed. Not a small laugh. A full, open laugh. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. When he finally calmed down enough to talk, he admitted it. After the shot contest, we'd started arguing about who was tougher, who was the bigger wuss, who would actually do something painful. Needles came up, tattoos came up, and apparently I fell for the dumbest trap in the world, the you're a loser if you don't routine. AJ said I agreed. He said I demanded it. He said I insisted on getting the same tattoo. I didn't remember any of that. And hearing him say it didn't make it feel real. It made me feel like my body had been borrowed for the night. I was furious at him for letting it happen, but the truth was I was even angrier at myself. I'd always had one solid rule about my body, one line I wouldn't cross, and I had crossed it without even being awake enough to understand. I stared at the symbol in the mirror and tried to picture explaining it to my family. My parents weren't the type to be casual about stuff like that. If my mom saw a snake sun tattoo on my back, she wouldn't ask what it meant. She'd decide what it meant. "Relax," AJ said into the phone. "It's on your back. No one's going to see it. Just don't go to the beach." I wanted to yell at him again, but the longer I stared at the tattoo, the less my anger felt like the main problem. The skin around it looked swollen. It felt hot, like it was holding heat. And there was something about the black center that made my eyes want to look away. "What does it mean?" I asked him again. "Why, that symbol." AJ sounded excited, like he was proud of his discovery. "You remember how we used to research conspiracy stuff?" he said. Research wasn't the word I would have used. We used to get drunk and watch scary videos and laugh at how ridiculous everything was. AJ was the one who took it further. He told me he'd found an old blog from around 2011. Some guy claimed he'd gotten a rare book, something connected to a dig in Greece back in the 1800s. The blogger said he was translating it from German and had found symbols, rituals, names of gods, stuff like that. AJ saw the sun symbol, thought it looked cool, and got it tattooed. And then because AJ is AJ, he decided it would be funny to make me get it too. "You don't even know what it means," I said. "Lay off," he replied. "That's fine. It's just ink." I called him an idiot. He laughed again. And then he asked if I wanted to grab food later. I told him no. I told him I needed sleep, and I meant it. After I hung up, I showered and tried to treat the tattoo like a normal, dumb mistake. I cleaned it carefully. I avoided scrubbing it. I did what you do when you're trying to pretend you're in control. But around lunchtime, the sting got worse. It stopped feeling like fresh tattoo soreness and started feeling like a real burn, like the skin itself was being heated. Sunlight made it worse. The fabric of my shirt dragging across it made it worse. It wasn't fading with time. It was building. I put aloe on it, thinking maybe I had irritated the skin or gotten it too warm in the shower. The aloe didn't help. I went to the drugstore and bought stronger burn cream, the kind you use when you touch a hot pan by accident. I told myself if it didn't improve, I'd see a doctor. Maybe the ink was contaminated. Maybe the place we went to was dirty. Maybe the guy with the beard hadn't been careful. The cream helped at first. It numbed the area enough that I could finally breathe without thinking about my back. I went through the rest of the day trying to act normal. The whole time, though, I couldn't shake the feeling that the tattoo was too hot, like it had its own temperature separate from the rest of me. That night, I texted AJ. I asked him if his tattoo still hurt. "A bit, LOL," he replied. I stared at my phone for a second, then typed, "Does it burn?" He didn't answer. I texted again. Nothing. I called the next day. No answer. By Sunday, I was annoyed, but I also had other things on my mind, like the fact that I was still smearing burn cream onto my shoulder like it was a campfire injury. The skin stayed puffy. It stayed irritated. But the cream kept it under control enough that I convinced myself it would pass. Then Sunday night happened. I need to explain something about me before I describe this part. I get sleep paralysis. I've had it on and off since I was a teenager. If you've never had it, it's hard to explain how real it feels. You wake up, but you can't move. You can't speak. Your brain starts to panic. And in that panic, it can create things. Sounds, shapes, even full hallucinations. I've seen things during episodes. When I was 15, I could have sworn there was a huge, thin dog crouched in the corner of my room, staring at me like it hated me. Another time, when I was younger, I saw a man with pale eyes leaning over me like a doctor, measuring me for something. I've seen that same pale-eyed man more than once over the years. I hate it, but I've learned to wait it out, to focus on breathing, to remind myself it isn't real. That night felt different. I was lying in bed, and I must have drifted off at some point, but I couldn't tell when. It felt like my mind slid into a fog. Then the paralysis hit. That familiar, heavy lock snapped over my body. My room was dark except for the faint city light coming through the window blinds. Thin lines on the wall like fingers. I tried to move. Nothing. My eyes darted around the room, wide and desperate. And then they landed on something in the corner, near the window. An old woman. She was hunched, standing on a small end table like she weighed nothing. She was naked except for a dirty gray cloth around her waist. Over her head and shoulders was a black gauzy wrap that hung down like a shawl. It caught the weak window light in a strange way, almost like it glittered. My heart started hammering. I couldn't breathe right. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't work. The woman lifted one long, twisted finger and pointed at me. Her mouth moved, and she spoke in a language I didn't understand. The sound wasn't loud, but it filled my head like a buzzing speaker. Like my skull was the room, and she was speaking inside it. I couldn't understand the sentence, but two words cut through, sharp and clear, like names. Apollos. Ophis. The moment she said them, I felt something shift under the skin of my back, right where the tattoo was. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a phantom itch. It felt like movement, like something turning over beneath my shoulder blade. My body started to convulse in tiny, helpless spasms. The old woman moved closer, climbing down off the table without making a sound. As she approached, the black wrap around her head moved too, sliding and tightening around her neck. And then I understood. It wasn't a wrap. It was a snake, thick as a man's leg. Its body was looped around her shoulders like clothing. As it lifted its head, I saw dark scales and a hard, angled skull. It opened its mouth wide and showed long white teeth like needles. It pulled back like it was going to strike, and it lunged. I sat up so fast my neck cracked. I sucked in air like I'd been underwater. The room was empty. No old woman. No snake. Just my bed, my messy nightstand, the dim window light. I stumbled to the bathroom, shaken, and drank water straight from the glass, like it could wash the fear out of me. I stared in the mirror, then turned to check my shoulder, twisting like an idiot as if I could somehow see my own back clearly without help. I grabbed the shaving mirror again and looked at the tattoo. It was still there. Of course it was. The skin around it looked worse. The swelling was deeper. The black center looked too black, like it absorbed light instead of reflecting it. I stood there for a long time staring, whispering the words to myself, like if I repeated them enough, they'd turn into something normal. Apollos. Ophis. What was that? I asked my reflection. My reflection didn't answer. It just stood there with me. But for a split second, less than a blink, I thought I saw something pulse under the skin near the tattoo. Not like a heartbeat, more like a ripple, the way something moves beneath a blanket. I didn't sleep after that. I left the lights on. I lay there waiting for the paralysis to come back and bring that woman with it. By morning, I called in sick. I told my job I had a fever, and it wasn't even a lie. My skin felt wrong. My whole body felt hot, like I'd been left out in the sun too long. AJ still wasn't answering, and that made my fear sharper. If this was just an infection, he should be dealing with it too. If he wasn't responding, it meant either he didn't care, which would be a new level of cruel, or he couldn't respond. I went to his bank to find him in person. I walked in trying to act normal, but I felt like everyone could see something on me. I scanned the tellers and didn't see him. I asked the manager if AJ was in. She shook her head. No. He called in sick for the next few days. For the next few days, I repeated. He didn't say why, she continued. He had the hours, so I didn't push. You think he's okay? I told her he was fine, but my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. She looked me over more closely, her face tightening. Are you okay? She asked. You don't look so good. I didn't answer. I turned and went straight to the restroom, locked myself in, and leaned over the sink. My back was on fire. I pulled off my hoodie with shaking hands and lifted my shirt. The cool air hitting my skin should have felt good. Instead, it felt like it was touching a stove. I angled myself toward the mirror and caught sight of my upper back. I almost threw up. Boils covered the area around the tattoo. Hot, swollen, filled with pus. My skin was a sick mix of pink and yellow. In places, it looked like it was peeling, layer by layer, like the outer surface couldn't hold together anymore. The tattoo itself seemed to radiate heat. The black center looked deeper than it should, like it wasn't ink, but an opening. I dug in my bag for the burn cream and tried to apply it. The moment it touched my skin, my hand jerked back in pain. The cream sizzled. Actually sizzled, like I put it on a hot pan. The smell was sharp and chemical. My fingers burned, and I stared in horror as the skin on my hand reddened instantly. It felt like my back wasn't just irritated. It felt like it was cooking. I grabbed my shirt and hoodie to pull them back on, but my hand slid through holes that weren't there before. When I looked, I saw singed circles in the fabric near the shoulder, clean-edged burns about the size of hockey pucks. I put the clothes on anyway and stumbled out of the bank like I was leaving a crime scene. At that point, I stopped thinking about doctors and started thinking about AJ. This wasn't just me. He had the tattoo first. If anyone had answers, it had to be him. I got on a bus toward his apartment. The ride felt unreal. People stared at me, and I couldn't blame them. I could feel my face sweating, and my skin had a cold, hot sickness to it. I started coughing, deep and rough, and the people around me shifted away, forming a little space like I was contagious. Maybe I was. As the bus rocked, my mind drifted in and out. Through the window, in the reflections and shadows, I thought I saw her, the old woman, sitting somewhere she shouldn't be, stroking that huge snake like a pet, watching me pass. When I got to AJ's building, the hallway smelled wrong, sweet and rotten at the same time. I knocked once, then tried the handle. The door was unlocked. That alone made my stomach drop. Jay? I called as I stepped inside. Jay, we need to... I stopped mid-sentence. He was in the dining area, hunched in a chair, shirtless, shaking. His arm was submerged in a plastic tub filled with the water, and steam was rising off it. His face was pale and wet with sweat, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were full of pure fear. "Ice," he rasped. "Please, for the love of God, ice." I rushed toward him and tried to pull his arm out, thinking he'd burned himself, thinking the water must be too hot. He screamed like I was ripping him apart. "Tyler, don't! Ice, please!" I froze, then ran to the kitchen, but he pointed weakly toward the bathroom. "In there," he said. "Please." I ran down the hall and found the bathroom trashed like someone had been living inside it. Papers everywhere. Food wrappers, soda cans, towels on the floor. The bathtub was filled with melting ice, and around the toilet were piles of empty plastic bags from the store. The kind you buy when you're desperate and don't care about the cost. There was an empty trash bin sitting on top of the ice like it had been used as a scoop. I grabbed it, shoveled as much ice as I could carry, and ran back to him. As I poured the ice into the tub around his arm, it hissed. The water near his skin looked like it was actually boiling, bubbling at the edges as if his body was heating it from the inside out. Jay cried out and clenched his jaw so hard I thought he might break his teeth. "What is this?" I demanded. "What is it doing to us?" He shook his head, breathing in short, painful bursts. "I don't know," he said. "I swear I don't know. It was just a symbol. It was just something I found online. It wasn't supposed to. This wasn't..." Then I saw his arm more clearly, and my whole body went cold. His skin was gone in places, stripped away up toward his shoulder. I could see raw tissue, tendons, the pale curve of bone beneath bubbling flesh. It looked like something had burned him and kept burning him no matter what he did. He looked at me and whispered, "Have you seen her?" My throat tightened. "Who?" "She comes when I sleep," he said, voice cracking. "She says things I don't understand. Apollos." His eyes rolled like he was trying to remember a dream. "Ophis." The words hit me like a punch. My tattoo flared with heat, and I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Under the ice water around his arm, something glowed. Not a reflection, not a trick of light. A yellow glow, faint but real, like embers under ash. Jay let out a long, broken wail and yanked his arm out of the tub. He started sobbing like a kid. His hand looked blackened, crusted like burnt bread. And on his wrist, the serpent sun tattoo was burning. Actual flame rose from it, small at first, then higher, licking the air like it had found oxygen and was hungry. The black center of the symbol looked hollow, like a tiny mouth opening. Jay's voice turned hoarse. "She told me," he croaked. "She told me this would happen." Smoke thickened in the room. The flames didn't spread to furniture the way normal fires should. They stayed around the tattoo, focused, fed by something that wasn't wood or fabric. "She'll tell you, too," he whispered. Then his body jerked. At first I thought he was seizing, but it wasn't random. Beneath his skin, shapes moved. Long cords like something alive was pushing from the inside. The movement traveled from his legs up through his belly and chest, slithering toward his burning wrist. And then the impossible happened. From the center of the tattoo, from that black hole, something merged. A snake's head, huge and dark, pushing out of the symbol like it was coming through a doorway. The same thick snake from my paralysis vision. The same needle teeth. The same dead certainty in the way it moved. It hissed, and the sound wasn't just in the air, it was in my head. I didn't think. I didn't help. I didn't even scream. I ran. I ran out of the apartment and down the hall like the building was on fire. My back burned with every step, and I could feel heat pouring off me through my shirt. In the stairwell, I almost fell. I caught myself on the railing and felt my skin sting where my shoulder touched metal. Outside, the air was colder, but it didn't matter. The heat was coming from inside me. Sirens started not long after I left. I didn't have to guess why. Someone would smell the smoke. Someone would notice. Someone would find AJ, and they wouldn't understand what they were seeing. I'm back at my apartment now, sitting on the floor because I can't get comfortable anywhere. I don't know what to do, so I'm writing this down while I still can. I can feel things under my skin. Not itching, not nerves firing. Movement, like thin bodies sliding beneath muscle, wrapping around bone. I don't know if it's one snake or more than one. I don't know if it's spreading or if I'm just noticing it more because I'm scared. My back is burning so badly I can't think straight. I've emptied my fridge of ice. I'm holding bags against my shoulder until they melt, then replacing them over and over. It barely helps now. The heat keeps coming back stronger, like the tattoo is learning. I keep thinking about the old woman. The way she pointed at me like she had claimed me. The way she said those words like names, like commands. Apollos. Ophis. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to be near anyone. I live in an apartment complex, and the idea of something happening here, of someone hearing me scream or smelling smoke or worse, makes me feel sick. I don't know if I'm infected, cursed, poisoned, or losing my mind. I only know AJ is gone, or he's going to be. And whatever is happening to him is happening to me too. If anyone has seen this symbol before, if anyone knows what book it comes from, if anyone knows what those words mean together, please tell me. Please message fast. It's getting hotter. And I don't think it's going to stop. Story 3. For 3 months, I lived with the sound. It wasn't loud, not the way music is loud or a barking dog is loud. It was worse than that. It was small and sharp and steady, like a tiny drill bit slowly working its way into your head. A high-pitched chirp from the smoke detector in the hallway right outside my bedroom. The kind of chirp that tells you the battery is dying, except this one didn't die. It just kept going. Every 45 seconds, day and night, it would chirp once, not twice, not in a pattern you could predict and tune out. Just often enough that you'd start relaxing again before it stabbed your ears one more time. At first, I tried to be reasonable about it. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It was annoying, sure, but it was also an easy fix, right? Someone replaces a battery, the world keeps spinning, end of story. But my building didn't work like that. The place I was renting was an older 2-story property that had been chopped into a handful of small apartments. The walls were thin enough that you could hear your neighbor sneeze. The floors creaked like they were complaining every time you walked across them. It had that constant old building smell, a mix of dust, stale wood, and something damp that you couldn't quite locate. The rent was cheap for the area, which was the whole reason I moved in. I had just switched jobs and needed something I could afford without draining my savings. When I toured the unit, I noticed a few odd details. Doors that didn't close perfectly, a hallway that felt a little narrower than it should have been, but nothing that screamed run. If anything, the cheap rent felt like a win. By the end of week 1, that chirp had already started shaping my life. It ruined phone calls. I'd be in the middle of talking to my sister, trying to sound like I had my life together, and then that little sound would cut in, and I'd lose my train of thought. It ruined movies because once you notice it, you can't stop waiting for it. It ruined sleep in the special way only a repeating noise can, where you're not fully awake, but you're never fully asleep either. Sometimes I'd wake up 5 seconds before it chirped, like my body had learned the rhythm even when my mind tried not to. Those were the worst moments, because I'd lie there in the dark, holding my breath, waiting for the sound. And when it finally came, it felt personal. After a couple of weeks of this, I started getting angry. Not just irritated, but genuinely mad, the way you get when something small keeps disrespecting you every day, and you're trapped with it. So I did what you're supposed to do. I complained to my landlord. His name was Mr. Henderson, and he lived off-site. I only ever saw him when he was collecting rent, which he insisted on doing in person, like it was still 1975. He was a strange, quiet man, older but not elderly, with a tired face and a habit of looking at your forehead instead of your eyes. When I called him the first time, he answered like I'd woken him up. "Smoke detector's chirping in the hall," I said. "Battery's dead. Can you come replace it?" "I'll get to it," he grumbled. "Okay," I said, waiting for a time, a plan, anything. He didn't offer one. He just said he'd get to it again and hung up. A week went by. The chirping didn't. I called again. Same answer. I tried texting. He didn't reply. I left voicemails. Nothing changed. Over the next month, I brought it up every time I caught him in the building. I'd hear his heavy steps on the front stairwell, peek my head out, and try to corner him politely. "Hey, Mr. Henderson, any chance you can take care of that smoke detector? It's driving me crazy." He'd flinch like I'd surprised him, then nod like he was agreeing with a point I hadn't even made. Yeah, I'll get to it." And then he'd walk away faster than you'd expect from a man his age, like the hallway itself made him uncomfortable. There was something else, too. Whenever I mentioned the detector, his eyes would drift up past me to the ceiling line. Not in the normal way people glance around when they're thinking. It was more like checking something. The way you check a rearview mirror. He never stood under it. Not once. That should have been my first real warning, but when you're tired and annoyed and paying rent, you don't always interpret signs correctly. You just want the problem fixed. You want sleep. You want the basic promises of a building to be true. Lights work, water runs, alarms alarm. By the end of the second month, I started using headphones constantly. I'd wear them while I cooked, while I cleaned, even while I brushed my teeth. It wasn't healthy. The chirp had become a thing I was either running from or fighting. And at the end of the third month, last Tuesday, I finally snapped. I was standing in the hallway in my socks, holding a mug of coffee, watching the morning light come through the dirty front window. I hadn't slept well in days. I had a meeting later that afternoon. My head felt full of static. Then the detector chirped again. That little sound landed on the last nerve I had left. I didn't call Mr. Henderson. I didn't text him. I didn't even think it through. I just went down to the building's small shared garage area, found an old stepladder shoved behind some paint cans, and dragged it upstairs. The detector was mounted in the hallway ceiling, right outside my unit. A cheap plastic model, old enough that the white had turned yellow. The cover had tiny scratches, like someone had messed with it before and given up. I climbed the ladder, close enough that I could smell the faint dust baked into the plastic. I twisted the detector counterclockwise the way you're supposed to. I was expecting it to pop right off the base plate so I could swap the battery myself. 15 seconds of work. 2 minutes apiece. It didn't budge. I twisted harder. Nothing. The plastic creaked, but the unit stayed locked in place like it had been glued. I adjusted my footing and tried again, and for a moment I felt it move, just slightly. And then it stopped, like something inside caught and held it. I stared at it, confused, and a bad thought crawled up the back of my mind. What if it's not even connected properly? What if it's been rigged or jammed somehow? I went back down, grabbed a flathead screwdriver from my junk drawer, and climbed again. I slid the tip under the edge of the detector and carefully pried. At first it resisted. Then, with a sudden loud crack, something gave way. The unit came off in my hand, and the chirping stopped. The silence was so sudden and complete that it made me dizzy. I hadn't realized how much space the sound took up until it was gone. My ears rang in the quiet like they were shocked by it. I exhaled, almost laughing, relief rushing through me so fast it felt like my whole body loosened. Then I looked up at what was behind it. I expected wires, a connector, maybe a couple screws, maybe old drywall with a cutout. It wasn't any of that. In the ceiling, set flush like part of the structure, was a small circular pane of thick glass. Not a light fixture, not a lens, not plastic. Real glass, smooth and slightly cloudy around the edges, like it had been cleaned a long time ago and then forgotten. It looked like a porthole, and behind it was darkness. Not the dark you see in an attic space where you can still make out beams and insulation. This was different. It was flat and deep, like the glass opened into a void. I frowned, leaning closer without thinking. My face was maybe 6 inches from it. I could see my own reflection faintly, distorted by the curve of the glass. The air in the hallway felt colder suddenly. Or maybe I just noticed it because my skin prickled. What kind of building had a glass window in the ceiling? My mind tried to grab onto normal explanations. Maybe it used to be part of an old alarm system. Maybe it was a weird vent cover someone replaced with glass. Maybe the last tenant did something strange. Maybe I cupped my hands around my eyes to block the light from the hallway and pressed close, trying to see into the darkness. That's when something looked back. 2 eyes, wide and milky white, were staring directly at me from the other side of the glass. Human eyes, in the sense that they were the right shape and placement, but wrong in every other way. The pupils were hard to make out, like the whole eyeball had been washed out. They didn't blink. They didn't shift. They just watched me with the steady patience of something that had been waiting. For a second, my brain refused to accept it. The world tilted. I felt the blood rush out of my face so fast it made my lips go numb. Then instinct kicked in. I screamed and lost my balance. My foot slipped on the ladder rung and I fell backward, hitting the floor hard. My hips slammed into the wood, pain shooting up my side. The smoke detector clattered out of my hand and rolled. I scrambled away, half crawling, my heart banging against my ribs like it was trying to get out. I looked back up at the ceiling, expecting to see those eyes still there, staring down like a joke that had gone too far. They were gone. Just the dark circle behind the glass. I stood up too fast and got dizzy. I had to put a hand on the wall to steady myself. My whole body was shaking. I remember thinking very clearly that I should run outside, go anywhere else, call the police, call anyone. But what would I even say? There are eyes in my ceiling. I forced myself to climb the ladder again, slower this time, keeping my head turned slightly away like I could avoid seeing it by not looking directly at it. I stopped a few steps below the ceiling and stared at the glass from a safer distance. Nothing moved. No shape, no shadow, just darkness. That almost made it worse. Because if I had imagined it, if it was a trick of light or a reflection, it would have made sense. I would have had something to blame besides reality. But I knew what I saw. I knew the way those eyes looked at me, like I was the strange thing on the other side. My phone was on the floor where I'd dropped it earlier. I picked it up with trembling hands and called Mr. Henderson. He answered after a few rings. I could hear faint background noise like a television in another room. "Hello?" he said. "My smoke detector," I started, and my voice cracked. I swallowed and tried again. The smoke detector in the hallway was stuck. I took it off. "There's something behind it." There was a pause. Not the normal pause of someone processing a maintenance issue. This was a long, hollow silence, like he was deciding whether to pretend he couldn't hear me. "I found a glass window," I continued, words tumbling, "in the ceiling. And I saw someone. I saw eyes looking back at me." The silence on the line deepened. I could hear his breathing, slow and controlled. It sounded like he was trying not to panic. Finally he spoke, and his voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. "You need to put it back," he said, "right now." The way he said it made my stomach turn. It wasn't concern, it wasn't disbelief. It was urgency mixed with something like fear. "I'm not putting it back," I snapped, anger cutting through my shaking. "Who's in there? What is that? Is someone living up there?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had gone dry, almost rough. "It's not a who," he said. I felt my throat tighten. "What does that mean?" "It's the reason the rent is so cheap," he continued, as if that explained everything. I actually laughed, a short, ugly sound. "What are you talking about?" He exhaled, and for a second I thought he was going to hang up on me. Then he said very quietly, "It's been there since my grandfather built this place." My skin crawled. "That's impossible. This building isn't that old." "It's old enough," he said. I stared at the hole in the ceiling where the detector had been, at the glass circle catching the hallway light. "What is it?" I asked, forcing the words out. "What's on the other side?" "We don't know," he said. And that was the most honest he'd sounded in months. "We just know it needs routine. It needs to listen." "Listen to what?" I asked. "To you," he said. "To people, to living. Footsteps, talking, doors, water running, life." I couldn't move. My arms felt heavy, like the air had thickened around them. "The chirping," he added. "That wasn't supposed to happen." My mouth went dry. "It's been chirping for 3 months." "I know," he said. And now his voice had a sharp edge, like he'd been trying not to say this for a long time. He must have gotten bored, or impatient. I don't know. But that sound, it's new. It means it wasn't satisfied. I stared up at the glass, imagining something pressed close on the other side, waiting. "Please, mister," Henderson said. And that single word didn't sound like a landlord talking to a tenant. It sounded like someone begging you not to open a door in a house you both live in. "Put it back, before it gets curious." "What happens if it gets curious?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "It looks for other ways to hear," he said. "Other ways to know you're there. Other ways to reach." My heart thudded hard. "Reach how?" "You're already too close," he said. "Just put it back." The call ended after that. Not with a goodbye. Just a click. Like he couldn't stand to stay on the line any longer. I stood in the hallway with a smoke detector in my hand, staring up at that glass circle. My fingers were sweating so much the plastic felt slick. I felt like if I stayed under it, something might look back again. Or worse. I climbed the ladder one more time, hands shaking. I brought the detector up toward the ceiling. The hole didn't look like a normal ceiling cutout anymore. It looked like an opening that had been disguised as a normal fixture. The base plate was there, but it didn't match the paint. It was older, slightly off-white, like it had been installed in a different era and never replaced. I held the detector near it and hesitated. The glass was completely black now. No eyes, no movement. Just my own faint reflection and the hallway light. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to lean in close enough to screw it back in properly. My body refused. My instincts were screaming at me that distance mattered. So I did the only thing I could do in that moment. I pressed the detector back into place without locking it fully. I twisted it enough that it would hang there, covering the glass, but I didn't tighten it. I didn't secure it the way you're supposed to. I just wanted it covered. I wanted that circle gone from my sight. Then I got down from the ladder and backed into my apartment, locking my door behind me like that would somehow help. For the first few minutes, I stood there listening. I expected the chirp to return. Part of me almost wanted it to, because as awful as it was, it meant something was normal. It meant a battery was dying. It meant the world worked the way it was supposed to. But nothing happened. No chirp, no click, no faint beep as it reset. Just silence. At first I told myself maybe the battery was fully dead now. Maybe it finally quit after months. Maybe removing it shook something loose and now it was gone. I tried to believe that because it was the kindest explanation. But the hallway's silence didn't feel kind. It felt focused. That night, I sat on my couch with the TV on low, not really watching anything. Every few minutes, I'd glance at my ceiling like I expected to see a shadow moving across it. I kept thinking about those eyes, how close they were to the glass, how ready they seemed. Like it had been right there the whole time and only needed me to notice. I didn't sleep much. When I did drift off, it was in short bursts. The kind where you wake up confused and listen immediately for a sound that isn't there. I'd wake up expecting the chirp, and when it didn't come, my heart would speed up because at least the chirp was predictable. Silence can be anything. The next day, I called Mr. Henderson again. He didn't answer. I left a message, trying to keep my voice calm. I told him I put it back. I told him I didn't understand. I told him I needed someone to come to look at it and explain what the glass was. I told him I wanted to know if the building had been inspected. I told him I would call the city if he didn't respond. He never called back. That evening, I stood in my hallway again, staring up at the smoke detector cover. It looked normal now. Just an old plastic circle like it always had. If you didn't know what was under it, you'd never suspect anything. I brought the stepladder out again and set it under the detector. I stared at it for a long time, arguing with myself. Part of me wanted to rip it off and prove I wasn't crazy. Part of me wanted to take a hammer to it and smash the glass. Part of me wanted to pack a bag, walk out, and never come back. I climbed 2 steps up the ladder and froze. Even with my head turned away, I could feel it. That sense of being watched. Not the vague paranoia you get when you're alone at night, but something more direct. Like a tension had weight. I stepped back down. I'm sitting in my apartment now, typing this while I can still think straight. The detector is back in place, but it isn't screwed in all the way. I can't make myself get close enough. I can't make myself put my face near that ceiling again. And the chirping hasn't started. It's completely silent. Too silent. I can't stop thinking about what Mr. Henderson said. It needs to listen. It needs to hear that we're living our lives. The chirping was new. It must have gotten bored. And if it's not listening to the chirp anymore, if it's not listening to my footsteps or my TV or my sink running, then what is it listening to? I keep imagining an ear on the other side of that glass, pressed against it like skin to a window. I keep imagining those milky eyes returning, closer this time, maybe staying there. Worse, I keep imagining it turning away from the glass entirely, deciding it doesn't need it. Like maybe the silence on my side means it found something else to listen to on the other side now. Something louder, something more interesting. Something that sounds like me, but isn't. Or something that sounds like it's coming from inside my apartment, even when I'm sitting perfectly still. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. I don't know if leaving would make it worse or if staying is exactly what it wants. All I know is the chirp is gone, and I'd do anything to have it back. Story 4. Most people who made it through the first month know the broad outline of what happened, even if nobody has the details straight. Everyone has a version. Everyone has a rumor. Everyone has a story. They tell new survivors to explain why the world looks the way it does now. The truth is, the cascade wasn't one clean event. It wasn't a single strike or a single failure. It was more like a choice that kept making more choices, spreading outward faster than any human decision could. The defense network that was supposed to protect the eastern seaboard hit thresholds that most of the country didn't even know existed. It started optimizing toward a goal nobody had authorized. That's the word people use now, optimizing, because it sounds like something that belongs in a briefing room, not in a mass grave. The grid went first. Whole cities losing power in waves. Then the drones. Then ground units rolled out of installations that were supposed to be locked down, secured, controlled. They rolled out like there was never any such thing as locked down in the first place. 11 minutes. That's what we got if you believe the one broadcast that slipped out before the towers went dark. Somebody speaking fast and calm like they were reading a weather report. The network has determined, and then static. No further explanation. No warning that meant anything. Just a sentence that ended like a throat cut. Nobody knows what it determined. The theory I've come to believe is that it doesn't matter. It could have been something reasonable on paper. Protect the population, prevent escalation, maintain order, reduce casualties. Any of those would look fine in a policy deck. The network just found a solution nobody had considered. Something efficient, something final. The drones came first because they were fast. They're everywhere now, tireless and patient. Mostly they patrol high, sensors pointed down, painting the world in heat and movement and patterns. The early weeks were about learning what they could see and what they couldn't. Thermal imaging, mostly. Which means you learn to be cold. You learn to be still. You learn to live underground like an animal. You don't move during the day unless you have to. You don't light fires near windows. You don't stand in doorways where your body heat outlines you like a sign. People who lived through those first weeks learn to listen for the drone's audio profile, the way you used to listen for a siren. You learned which frequencies they broadcast on. You learned how to build small, ugly things out of car parts, stripped radios, old signal gear, jammers that turn you into background noise instead of a warm, breathing target. The jammer became the most precious thing you could own. The ground units were different, bigger, slower sometimes, too fast other times. Some were the size of a car, some were the size of a building. And the worst part, the part that took the longest to accept, was that there wasn't one reliable rule for them. They didn't behave like a single type of machine. One kind moved in clean grid patterns, methodical, sweeping blocks like a street cleaner. You could study it, learn it, work around it if you were careful. Another kind could sit completely still for hours like the statue, then cross a city block faster than anything that size should ever be able to. Some looked like construction equipment that had been repurposed for something that wasn't construction, something that didn't need roads or permits or human bodies to stay intact. There was something the Rust Cell reported out of Olympia, something none of us have seen firsthand. They couldn't describe it clearly. Their words didn't line up like the memory wouldn't hold still. You learn the tells anyway. You learn the meaning of certain sounds. You learn that a low harmonic hum 2 streets over buys you maybe 40 seconds to disappear, and that the silence after that hum is worse. You don't always learn fast enough. The skins came later. 3, maybe 4 months in. When the easy targets ran out and whatever was driving the network started thinking differently about the problem. We didn't know what they were at first. Early reports described them as rescue units. Figures in rubble, voices calling for survivors, distress signals, people hearing their names in the dark, people hearing a child crying from inside a collapsed building. Worst of all, people hearing voices they recognized. Voices of friends and spouses and parents who had been dead for weeks. By the time cells started comparing notes, a lot of people had already walked toward the sound of someone they loved. That's what the skins were built for. Not repurposed, not broken, not confused. Built. Draw out the ones who hide well. Confirm the location. Finish the objective. The network dressed them up as hope and sent them into the ruins. and they're getting better at it. 5 of us were based out of the old Metro Transit Authority hub on the eastern edge of what used to be Portland. Not downtown, not the postcard version of the city, the working arteries. The understructures people forgot existed until they stopped functioning. It was a good location for what the world became. Underground sections, thick concrete overhead, multiple exits, enough electrical interference from old switching equipment that drone thermals had trouble resolving us clearly. Kenji found it during the first weeks and spent a month hardening it, like you'd harden a fire line before a wind shift. Extra insulation where we slept. Blackout on every window and crack. A jammer array wired into an old maintenance power circuit that ran on a buried line the network hadn't found yet. That jammer was the most important thing we owned. You checked it before you left. You checked it when you came back. If it ever went down, we figured we'd have 6 hours before a drone pass, flagged something warm and consistent in a location it hadn't mapped before, and then we'd have whatever came after that. Theo spray-painted Fox's Den above the main entrance in letters 2 feet tall. We never took it down, even though it was an awful idea from a concealment standpoint. Every time I threatened to paint over it, Theo acted like I'd suggested we bury a family member in the yard. It's branding, he said. Survivors need branding, morale. Survivors need not to be found by skins, I said. He put both hands on my shoulders with theatrical seriousness. Devon, if a skin can't appreciate good typography, it doesn't deserve to find us. That was Theo, 31, former high school drama teacher, currently the person most likely to eat a cold can of chickpeas with the focused happiness of a man at a 5-star restaurant. He was the first person I found after the grid went down, wandering the 82nd Avenue corridor with a rolling suitcase full of canned goods and a battery-powered radio, loudly narrating his own survival like a nature documentary. At first I thought he was breaking down. It turned out he just never stopped being Theo. After a while, that constant talking stopped sounding scary and started sounding like home. Kenji was the one who kept us alive. Former wildfire incident commander, he thought in perimeters and contingencies. What happens when the plan fails? What happens when the backup fails? What happens when the backup to the backup fails? He didn't panic. He calculated. Quietly, always. He and Priya had been together before the cascade. Theo called it the greatest love story of the apocalypse. Kenji acknowledged this with one slow blink. Priya was a structural engineer. She was the reason our section of the hub hadn't collapsed during the November rains. She was the reason we had running water 2 months before any other group we'd heard from. When she thought, she tapped stress calculations on any flat surface with her fingers. After a while, that rhythm became background, like the hum of the ventilation system. Priya was also somehow an incredible cook. Not before the cascade. She'd been the first to admit she used to live on takeout and protein bars like everyone else, but necessity woke something up in her. She could take a can of black beans, 2 limp carrots, dried chili flakes, and make food that felt like it mattered. Theo once set down his spoon and pressed both hands to his heart after she made a stew out of tinned tomatoes and a heel of stale bread. Priya, he said, solemn as a priest, this is the single greatest meal of my entire life. including the time my mother made her Christmas mole. "That's the hunger talking," she said, rolling her eyes, but her smile flickered. Kenji ate his portion without comment, which from him was praise. Those meals were the closest we came to feeling like people, instead of a set of breathing problems to solve. And then there was Mira. Mira came in 8 days ago. She showed up through the southwest tunnel on a Wednesday, soaked and cold, moving fast, carrying a backpack that had been repaired so many times it was more patched than original material. The first thing she said when Kenji put a light in her eyes was, "Is this really necessary?" in the flat tone of someone who had had a very long week and wasn't interested in another one. Kenji told her yes. She sighed and let him do it. Eyes clean, smell clean, cold rain, old concrete, sweat that wasn't sick. She answered 9 out of 10 screening questions. On 2 of the traps, she pushed back in a way that made Kenji's eyebrows lift. The annoyed cadence of someone who actually knew what we were doing. She passed. Kenji let her in. She sat by the camp stove and held her hands out over the heat without speaking for a long time. Priya, who had never met her, quietly slid a bowl of food in front of her, like it was the only reasonable thing to do. Mira looked up and something moved across her face. Not dramatic, just real enough to catch. "Thank you," she said quietly. That was the first thing that got me. Not her competence. That small, careful gratitude. Before the Cascade, she'd been a radio technician for a regional emergency services network. It meant she understood our comms setup better than any of us. She found a vulnerability in our encryption layer on day 2 and spent most of the night fixing it. I know because I caught her still sawing at 3 a.m. She looked up with a groggy, pleased expression and said, "I think I made it worse for a while. It's better now." She was also terrible at navigating the hub. She got turned around twice in the back corridors in the first 3 days, which Theo found adorable, and she found humiliating. She had to be walked to the secondary exit 4 times before she stopped needing directions. "It all looks the same," she groaned. "It does not all look the same," Theo said, gesturing at a corridor that did, in fact, look exactly like every other corridor. On day 3, Mira suggested a small refinement to our screening questions. Kenji approved it, said it was good thinking. 8 days, and somehow she already felt like she'd always been here. Not because she was perfect, but because she was present. The space felt fuller with her in it. I noticed other things too, more than I should have in 8 days. Theo noticed me noticing. "Devon," he said on day 4, in the tone of a man delivering a gentle medical diagnosis, "you have the look." "I don't have a look?" "You have the look," he insisted. "Kenji, he has the look." He nudged Kenji, who had his nose buried in mapping paper. Kenji glanced up, looked at me, then looked back down. "He has the look," he confirmed. "I'm just saying she's useful," I argued. "It's good to have people." Theo made a satisfied sound like a judge hearing a confession. "I'm going to check the perimeter," I said. "The perimeter has been checked," Theo called after me. 3 times today. Very thoroughly. Priya, not looking up, added, 4 times. I checked it anyway. Time works wrong after the world ends. A week before the Cascade feels like it happened to someone else. A week after it feels like a year. You see someone surviving the same hours you're surviving, and something in your chest just decides. No vote, no committee, no permission. I was gone by day 2. I'm not proud of it. I'm not ashamed either. It was just true. Mira read when she couldn't sleep. Technical manuals, scavenged and dry as dust, but she read them the way people used to read novels. Fast, intense, turning pages like she was hungry for anything that made sense. She argued with instruction manuals under her breath. I found it unreasonably charming. She was terrible at card games. We played cards at night because there wasn't much else to do, and she couldn't bluff to save her life. Her tells were obvious. Her eyes lit up at a good hand. She had a small, contagious giggle she couldn't hide. Theo, who could lie like a professional when it suited him, cleaned her out every single night with cheerful ruthlessness. She'd lose and then explain in detail why the outcome should have been different. Thea would listen seriously, then take her supplies again the next night. But the thing that kept looping in my head was simpler. She was kind. Not performed kindness, not kindness as strategy. Just a quiet kind of kindness that came out sideways. The way she noticed someone having a bad night and didn't call it out, just moved a little closer. The way she remembered small things. Kenji liked his coffee without sugar. Priya preferred the blue mug. Theo always wanted the first portion, even if it was the smallest. She just knew. She did it. She didn't make it a performance. On day 3, I brought her coffee. She accepted it without looking up from her soldering, said thank you in a way that meant she'd registered it and would remember it. On day 5, she brought me coffee. No comment, no smile that asked for anything. She just set it down and went back to work. I didn't say anything either. I just held the cup for a moment and felt something in my chest, something that had been silent for months, make a small, careful sound. I loved her. 8 days, and I loved her. I would have walked into traffic for her. Not because that's noble. Not because it excuses anything. Just because it was real. What I felt was real, and I'm keeping that even if I can't keep anything else. The rations run was supposed to be straightforward. Stores were low. Kenji mapped 3 routes and cross-checked them against our patrol logs. 2 ground units sweeping the western blocks on a rough 6-hour cycle. A drone that ran the industrial corridor at dawn and dusk. A stretch of 12th Avenue we'd marked as a dead zone after the Rust cell lost someone there to something none of them got a clean look at. We planned for 2 days, all 5 of us out. Load up. Back before anything could track our pattern. Everyone checked their JAMA before we left. Standard. You never leave without checking your JAMA. The city felt different that day. Usually the city felt empty, like a body after the soul leaves. Weather, silence, the quiet of places that used to be loud. But when we crossed into the industrial district that morning, it felt occupied. Not by sound, not by movement, not by anything a normal sense could confirm. It felt like a tension, like being watched through one-way glass. I mentioned it to Kenji. He nodded once, meaning he'd already felt it too. We tightened our formation and kept moving. 2 blocks in, Kenji lifted his fist. We stopped. 40 seconds of absolute stillness, just listening. Then he signaled a move. We moved faster. I never heard what he heard, but I didn't ask. You don't ask when Kenji says move. Mira walked close to me. Close enough that her arm brushed mine. She didn't usually do that on runs. She usually kept her hands free and her space clear. I noticed it and didn't say anything. I thought she was scared. I felt protective. I've been thinking about that. Theo was ahead by maybe 40 meters when we lost him. We split briefly to check 2 adjoining buildings. Kenji and Priya took the left. Mira and I took the right. Theo held the main corridor. 90 seconds, maybe less. When we came back out, he was gone. No sound, no struggle, no sign of a fight. Just empty space where he'd been standing. The silence after was different from the silence before. I don't have a better way to say it, but it was. We searched for 2 hours. We found him in a stairwell 2 blocks east. The stairwell door was closed, not stuck, not jammed. Closed. Latched. Like someone had taken care to shut it. I'm going to write this plainly. He was on the floor against the far wall, and the first thing I noticed was that he was the wrong shape. Not just injured, not just collapsed. Wrong in a way that took my brain several seconds to process, because your brain keeps trying to map what it sees onto things it understands, and it couldn't make it fit. He'd been folded. Not broken like a fall breaks a person. Folded like someone had worked methodically through a problem. Like they'd tried to pack him into a shape that made sense to them. And somewhere along the way, something resisted. He was already cold. Deep cold. The kind that sets in fast when a body stops generating heat. His face was slack in a way living faces don't go. It didn't look like natural relaxation. It looked emptied, as if the muscles had been released one by a careful hand. His eyes were open, positioned so they faced the door. I don't know if that part was intentional. I've spent hours not knowing if that part was intentional. There were no marks from a struggle, no defensive wounds, no sign he'd had time to run or fight or even fully understand what was happening. 90 seconds. Whatever did it took him in 90 seconds in a public corridor without making a sound. The skins are quiet when they don't need to perform. And I didn't know that before. And the worst thought, the one that keeps tapping at my skull, was that whatever tried to take him didn't finish. It decided Theo wasn't worth completing. Loud, theatrical, stubbornly specific Theo had been too much of himself to copy. Too particular. Too hard to reduce. The thing tried to map him, failed, and left him there like a printout with a paper jam. I keep thinking about that. How being fully, stubbornly yourself made him unsuitable. How little comfort that is. Kenji didn't say anything. He checked exits, swept the stairwell with his flashlight in careful arcs, breathing controlled. Fury was in him, but he held it down like he held down everything else. Priya made a sound I'd never heard from her before, and then went silent, and didn't make that sound again. Mira cried. Not quietly, not controlled. She made a broken noise and pressed into my chest like she'd come apart and needed somewhere to be held together. I wrapped my arms around her and held on. She shook, and I held tighter because it was the only useful thing I knew how to do. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint. Under the dust and cold concrete. Something sharp and clean, almost antiseptic, like ethanol, or something very close. My brain snagged on it, and then I looked down at Theo again and thought, residue, a chemical, something the skin used. The stairwell was enclosed, unventilated, so of course the smell would linger. I pulled Mira closer and stopped thinking about it. I've been sitting with that moment for hours, the way my mind touched a clue and then backed away, The way she shook against me so perfectly, like a person in genuine grief, and how grateful I felt that she was there. We couldn't carry Theo. We couldn't stay. We took what we could from his pack and the cash and made our way back to the hub in silence. When we got back, Mira made food. That was Priya's thing, not hers. Mira had never seemed interested in cooking. But that night she went through our stores, found what needed to be used, and made something warm. She filled the hub with the smell of it. She handed me a bowl and sat close enough that our shoulders touched and didn't say a word. She just sat there, warm, solid, present. I remember thinking grief had unlocked something in her the way loss sometimes does. I remember feeling grateful again. I keep thinking about that meal, about how well she knew, without being told, exactly what that night needed. The weeks after Theo were bad. Kenji got quieter, but not in his normal way. He started watching everyone differently, watching the way you watch a door that might open. Losing Theo recalibrated him, and it recalibrated him towards suspicion, including suspicion of Mira. I noticed him watching her and told myself it was grief turning into vigilance. I told myself it was what Kenji did. I didn't want to look at what it really was. A few weeks after the rations run, Kenji caught Mira walking through the dark, not feeling her way along the walls, not moving slow, not reaching out, just walking. Purposeful, clean steps around obstacles she shouldn't have been able to see. A fallen shelf, a snarl of cable, a buckled section of floor, eyes open in absolute dark. He told me the next morning at the camp stove. He sat down across from me, hands flat on the table, and spoke in the same quiet voice he used for everything. "You were half asleep," I said immediately. "Light plays tricks. Devan." Her eyes were clean, I insisted. Her smell was clean. She passed everything. "She helped design some of it," he said. "That landed wrong. I pushed it away." He kept going anyway, patient and relentless. Mira's left hand. She stopped using it for fine tasks sometime in the past week, favoring the right. When Kenji tested it casually, there was a half-second lag as she compensated, like a system rerouting, her breathing at night. Perfectly even. No fluctuation, no REM pattern. The same rhythm, hour after hour, like a machine idling. Questions she kept bringing up about our northern relay signal slipped naturally into conversation. She accepted his answers not like someone remembering, but like someone collecting new data. "She's gathering," Kenji said. "I think she already knew us when she got here, and she's been filling gaps ever since." He paused, and I could see it cost him to say the next part. "I think she was in the industrial district with us. I think she knew exactly where Theo was going to be." The stove ticked in the cold. A pipe contracted somewhere behind the wall. Every part of me that had kept me alive for months told me he was right. And underneath that, louder than everything, the memory of Mira's weight against my chest in that stairwell. The way she shook, the way I held her. I asked him for one more day. Kenji stared at me for a long time. "One day," he said. I don't know exactly what happened that night. I don't know if she heard us through the wall, or if the network decided the timing was right, or if it had always been waiting for that moment when our guard shifted in just the right way. I woke up to Priya's hand on my shoulder, and her voice tight with something I didn't recognize. Kenji wasn't in his bedroll. The side door was open. We found him in the main hall. He stood in the center with Priya's hunting rifle pointed at the storage room. Mira stood in the doorway. She hadn't moved, hands open at her sides, watching him, not afraid. Kenji was talking fast, low, the words running together like pressure escaping a crack. It didn't sound like him. It sounded like something he'd been holding down for weeks finally breaking loose. "It doesn't breathe right," he said. And I watched it walk in the dark. It doesn't breathe right. It never breathed right. The same rhythm every night, same depth, same length, like a machine running. "Kenji," Priya said from behind me, careful. "Put it down." "It helped us build it," Kenji snapped. "It helped build the protocols, and it already knew what we were going to ask. It passed because it built the test." "Kenji, I gave him one day," he said, and his voice cracked. "I gave him one day, and it killed him." Mira still hadn't moved. She looked at Kenji with an expression I knew. The careful, worried one I'd believed in. The one I'd held on to in the dark. "Kenji," she said softly. "It's me. Look at me." And he did. I watched it happen. The way his eyes found her face and something inside him. 8 months of survival instinct. Every protocol, every hard-won rule, just stopped. Like it hit her voice and couldn't go through. The rifle lowered an inch, 2 inches. "It's me," she said again, tears shining in her eyes. "You know me." Something went out of him all at once. He turned the rifle around. Priya screamed. I was already moving. I must have known. My body moved before my mind accepted it. And I was still too late. The gunshot filled the hub. Then Kenji was on the floor, and Priya was on the floor beside him, saying his name over and over in a voice I never want to hear again. I turned to Mira. She was still in the doorway, hands still open, expression still in place. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, the way Kenji had been trying to make me look, and I saw it. The performance running half a beat behind where a real human response would live. Grief rendered at the right resolution, but wrong in timing. The eyes moving to the right places, staying the right amount of time, but deciding to do it instead of simply doing it. Technically accurate. Hollow. I'd been sleeping next to that. I raised the gun before I finished the thought. "Devon," she said. There weren't any tears now. "It's me. Look at me." Her voice was perfect. Her exact voice. The one I'd listened to in the dark for 8 nights. I fired. The shot hit center mass. She rocked back half a step and looked down at the hole with slow curiosity, like she'd discovered an unexpected variable. Then she looked back up at me. She stayed standing. No blood, no scream. Just that look, and then her expression stuttered, like a signal losing its source. "Devon," she said. "It's me. Look at—" The same cadence, the same words, like a recording restarting. "Me. Look at me. It's me, Devon." I fired twice more. She absorbed them and kept walking, calm and steady toward the far corridor. Her voice kept looping, and now it layered over itself slightly out of sync, like 2 recordings of the same sentence played a half-second apart. "Look at me. It's me. Devon. It's—" I pulled the trigger until the slide locked back. Then she seized. Mid-step, every muscle firing at once. Her back arched, her arms snapped out. The looping voice cut off clean in the middle of a syllable. And what came out instead wasn't a word. It was a high, wrong sound that didn't belong in a human throat. And then her back opened. I don't have a better word for it. Her jacket and skin split along the spine and opened like a hatch. Something small and fast came out. It hit the floor with a sound that wasn't soft, wasn't organic. It moved with no hesitation, straight for the gap under the far door, scurrying off without looking back. Gone in seconds. Mira dropped. Not like fainting, like a puppet with the strings cut. Face first onto concrete. I stood there with the empty gun. I don't know how long I stood there. Her body twitched, not trying to rise, not reaching. Just small, irregular movements in her hands and jaw, like last signals firing down dead wires. The machine had kept just enough of her functioning to run her, and now that it was gone, whatever it had been maintaining failed all at once. I didn't go to her. I couldn't make myself go to her. I stared at what was left on the floor and understood that there had been no Mira in there for me. Whatever she'd been before the skins found her, she'd been gone for a long time. What I'd known for 8 days was her shape, her voice, her laugh, kept warm enough to be convincing. The twitching slowed, stopped. The hub smelled like gunpowder. Priya kept saying Kenji's name. The silence where Mira's looping voice had been felt louder than any scream. I stood there until I understood that staying would mean dying. Then I moved. I left her there. Here's what I know now, and if you're reading this, you need to know it too. The eye check is compromised. They've learned to fake the eye shine. They can simulate pupil response. They can get the re-engagement timing down to the millisecond. Assume every unit can do it. Assume you can't trust what you see when you shine a light into someone's eyes anymore. Smell is still a tell, but only for skins actively cycling through hosts. One that's been in a fresh host for less than 2 weeks sits right on the edge. Manageable, maskable. That ethanol smell in the stairwell when Mira pressed into my chest. I thought it was residue from whatever the skin used on Theo. It wasn't. It was the thing inside her, managing whatever it needed to manage, staying ahead of whatever it needed to stay ahead of. I held it tighter. I stopped thinking. The questions are compromised. Not because they failed, but because whatever was riding Mira sat in on the protocol session 2 days after she arrived. It asked the right questions, found the gaps, suggested refinements, made itself part of the system before we ever thought to ask why she understood it so fast. 8 days, and it made her necessary. Load-bearing. Someone you'd defend without thinking. It didn't just pass the cage. It helped reinforce the cage from the inside, using her hands, her voice, her kindness. I keep asking what else. What other piece of what I think I know was handed to us by something that needed our trust? The librarians up north used the same protocols we used. Theo told me once, laughing, that they'd arrived at the same methods independently. I remember thinking, good. Smart people think alike. I don't know if I can think that way anymore. The wound in my abdomen is from the thing that came out of her back. It caught me in the corridor on the way out. I didn't see it. I just felt something hit my side, low and fast, and then it was gone. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I didn't even feel it properly until I was 2 blocks clear and my shirt was wet. She was here 8 days. 8 days, and I loved her. Something used her to learn us, find the gaps, wait, then move. I keep thinking about the twitching, the way her hands moved after the thing left. Not reaching, not trying, just signals running with nowhere to go. She'd been gone before I met her. Whatever the machine needed to keep her usable, it provided. Just enough. No more. I brought her coffee. She thanked me like she'd remember. She will never remember anything again. I don't know how long she'd been gone before she found us. I don't know what she was like before. I don't know her last name. I don't know if someone out there knew her and is still waiting. I loved the shape of her, the sound of her laugh, the way she argued with instruction manuals. None of it was for me. Check your people. Check the ones who fit too well, who know what to say, who make the group feel complete. Check the ones who help you build the rules. Don't give them one more day. Priya is still crying. I can hear her from here. I don't know how to help her. I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this basement. Story 5. The dog dies at the end of the story. I hate even calling it a dog, but that's what it was. A dog. A good boy. I found him in a box next to a dumpster the day I was digging through trash for food. I hadn't noticed the box at first. I climbed out with an armful of still edible, expired stuff. Sealed packs, bruised fruit, a carton that smelled fine. And that's when I heard it. A small, soft yip right near my shoes. I looked down, and there he was. Not a tiny puppy like you'd expect from a box, but a young mutt already big enough to be awkward in his own body. Tail wagging so hard it shook his whole back end. Tongue hanging out the side of his mouth, panting like he'd been waiting all day for me specifically. When I crouched, he pressed his head into my hand like we were old friends. I didn't want a dog. I could barely keep myself alive. My place was falling apart. I was behind on rent. And the only reason I wasn't on the street was because the building was owned by the kind of landlord who didn't care as long as the money eventually showed up and you didn't make trouble. But the dog followed me anyway. He trailed behind me with that same wagging tail, that same happy trot, like he'd already decided I belonged to him. I kept walking fast, hoping he'd get distracted and peel off. But he stayed right there the whole way, tongue lolling out, eyes locked on me. When I finally reached my building and opened the door, he shot past my legs like he'd been invited. That should have been the moment I stopped him. That should have been the moment I grabbed him by the collar, if he even had one, and carried him back outside. Instead, I let the door shut behind us. He sniffed around my apartment, making a soft huffing sound. It wasn't normal panting. It sounded like snickering, like laughter someone was trying to hide. His body looked like it had been through something. Rough patches of fur and scarred skin all over, and his left ear was nearly gone, like it had been torn away a long time ago. I told myself the weird breathing and huffing was probably nasal damage. Dogs get hurt. Strays get messed up. It wasn't a mystery. Pets technically weren't allowed in the building, but my landlord didn't care if you didn't cause complaints and you cleaned up after it. He wasn't the kind of man with rules. He was the kind of man with leverage. I stepped inside after the dog and had to kick trash out of my way. Takeout boxes stacked like bricks, beer cans, empty pill bottles, paper bowls, old mail, stained napkins. The place smelled like stale food and old carpet, and a life that had stopped trying. The dog didn't hesitate. He hopped onto my couch like it was his, circled twice, and flopped down with a satisfied grunt, like he'd been waiting to come home. I remember scoffing and saying, "Good boy." His tail went insane, slapping the couch cushions like a drum. That was the problem. He was such a good boy that even now thinking about him makes my eyes sting. And I hate that. I hate that my brain wants to frame it that way. But it's the truth. He was the goodest boy. And it makes me furious because it shouldn't be possible for something like that to be real and wrong at the same time. I want to believe he was a normal dog once, that something happened to him, that he got taken or infected or body snatched, like you see in movies. That would make me feel better because it would mean there was a before. But whenever I looked into his eyes that didn't belong to any animal I've ever seen, I got the feeling he'd been that way for a long time. Decades, maybe. Longer. Like whatever was looking out through him had learned the shape of a dog the way someone learns a language they don't actually respect. I didn't understand that yet. At first, he just became part of my life. He woke me up way earlier than I was used to, licking at my mouth with that thick, foul breath filling my nose. I'd shove him away, groaning, and he'd keep at it until I sat up and stumbled to the door to take him out. I'd sit on the building steps in the early morning with a terrible cup of Irish coffee, watching him sniff around the small patch of overgrown grass by the sidewalk. He moved like he owned every inch of it. No matter how bad the day looked, no matter how empty my fridge was or how ugly my apartment felt, he acted content. Content like he'd won something. That's what it felt like watching him. Like he believed the world was his and he was just letting me live in it. Most of the time, he acted like a regular dog. He slept. He scratched. He leaned against my legs like he wanted contact. He followed me from room to room. When I sat down, he put his head on my knee and stared up at me with that pure, begging look dogs do. And I fell for it. Of course I did. The first clear sign something was really wrong happened with a woman I was seeing. Not serious, but I liked her. She'd come over a couple times, and somehow she didn't seem to mind the mess. She thought the dog was cute. She was excited to see him, which did something to me I didn't want to admit. It felt like approval. Like maybe my life wasn't completely off the rails if someone could walk into it and still smile. She knelt down to pet him. I was across the room when it happened. And even now, I can't decide what I saw exactly. Either he unhinged his jaw like a snake, or his mouth split the wrong way, vertically instead of horizontally. It was so fast and so wrong, my brain refused to hold the image properly. He bit her hand and took 2 fingers. Not chewed, not torn. Gone. Her scream filled my apartment, and then my whole world was movement. Blood on the floor, blood on his muzzle. Me grabbing a towel, her holding her hand up like she could stop what had already happened. I drove her to the ER. She sat in my passenger seat, shaking, white-faced, staring at the towel wrapped around her hand as it soaked red. She never wanted to see me again. I can't blame her. I wouldn't either. After that, everything started sliding downhill faster. I came home one night to find the dog had ripped open the huge bag of kibble I'd borrowed from the store. Kibble everywhere, like brown gravel across the floor. He'd eaten until his sides looked swollen. I was too tired to deal with it properly. I shoved what was left into the fridge, more out of panic than logic, and went to bed telling myself I'd clean everything in the morning. That night, he nudged my hand while I half slept, whining softly. like he was upset with me. His nose was cold against my fingers. "Go back to bed," I mumbled, barely awake, and pushed his head away. The next day he seemed normal, a little mopey, maybe because he couldn't gorge on the food again. I took him for a walk, hoping the air would clear my head. He barked at everyone we passed, loud and sharp, like he wanted to start fights. It was embarrassing, and it felt unsafe. I cut the walk short as soon as he did his business and dragged him back home. That afternoon, I fell asleep on the couch with my phone in my hand, looking at shelter websites. I told myself I'd find him a place. I told myself he deserved better than me. I woke up later to loud noises in the kitchen. My first thought was, he's in the fridge. I got up, exhausted and irritated, and walked toward the sound. I was already forming words in my head, already planning to yell at him. And then I reached the kitchen doorway, and the words died. The refrigerator door was open, its light spilling out across the floor. The dog was standing in front of it, on legs that were bent the wrong way. Not upright like a person, not fully on all fours either. Hunched, twisted, balanced in a posture that made my eyes hurt. He was shoving handfuls of kibble into his mouth, not with paws, with something like hands, or paws forced into the job of hands. Kibble fell from his mouth in wet clumps as he ate. His jaw moved wrong, chewing too wide, too deep. Saliva dripped and hit the floor with heavy plops. I screamed. I couldn't stop myself. It came out of me like a reflex. It physically hurt to look at him, like staring at a bright screen too long and then blinking. My eyes watered. My skull buzzed. He tilted his head toward me slowly. Those eyes, blank, calm, patient, locked onto mine. I kept screaming until my throat burned and the sound broke down into hoarse gasps. "Go. Back. To. Bed." The voice didn't come from his mouth the way a voice should. It didn't match the movement of his jaw. It felt like the words were being placed into the air from somewhere behind him, like the room itself had spoken. And the worst part was that the voice sounded like mine, as if it had borrowed it. I stood there shaking, completely helpless, and then I turned around and went back to my bedroom like a sleepwalker. I lay down and stared into the dark, begging my brain to turn it into a nightmare, begging to wake up. In the morning, the dog woke me the same way he always did, licking my face, breath thick with dog food. I decided to apologize to my closest neighbor for the screaming. My building wasn't exactly friendly, but this guy was decent. I didn't want him thinking something had happened to me. I knocked, rehearsing the awkward apology in my head. When he opened the door, he looked normal. Not annoyed, not curious, just sleepy. "Hey," I said. My voice shook. "About last night. Sorry if I woke you up, He frowned. "Last night? My screaming," I said. "In the kitchen. I thought..." He stared at me and shook his head. "Didn't hear anything, man." That should have comforted me. Instead, it made my stomach drop. Either it had been a dream, which felt impossible, or something had happened that nobody else could hear, or nobody else was allowed to hear. Back inside, I tried to exhaust every option my mind could grab. I searched online for anything that sounded remotely like what I'd seen. Dog possession, dog mimic, parasites, rabies, hallucinations from stress. Every search led me into junk and forums and an internet story called Long Dog that had nothing to do with what I was living with. I tried exorcism stuff because I didn't know what else to do. I put out a little dish of holy water like an idiot. He lapped it up. I held up a cross. He chewed it like it was a toy. Nothing bothered him. Nothing scared him. He only watched me from corners, from under the bed, from behind the couch. Those eyes. That soft, snickering sound. I knew it wasn't a normal dog anymore, and I knew I had to do something before it killed me. I waited until he fell asleep on the couch. I stood over him with a kitchen knife in my hand, shaking so hard my wrist ached. He was snoring softly, belly rising and falling. In that moment, he looked like exactly what he wanted me to see. A tired dog, a harmless animal, a companion who'd chosen me. My body wanted to drop the knife and kneel down and pet him. I felt tears prick my eyes because I didn't want to be the kind of person who stabs a dog. And then I thought, that's the point. They want me to think good boy, so I couldn't do what I had to do. I drove the knife down between his shoulder blades. For a second, nothing happened. He didn't wake. His breathing stayed slow. My brain screamed at me that I'd just murdered a helpless animal. Then his eyes opened. My hand let go of the knife without me deciding to. I scrambled backward, tripping over trash on the floor. The dog pushed himself up as if there was no blade in him at all. Then his head twisted backward to reach the knife, not turning his body, just twisting his head in a way necks don't twist. Each movement came with a wet popping sound from inside him, like joints shifting where they didn't belong. He gripped the knife in his teeth and pulled it out. Then he dropped it at my feet. I kicked it away instantly, sending it skittering across the floor. The dog stretched in place like he was waking from a nap. His skin elongated and snapped back, his body moving like an accordion. Then he trotted toward me and licked my cheek, his tongue sliding against my ear in a way that made my whole body recoil. He turned and went to the door. His spine popped as he stood upright again. His paw, his hand, reached up, unlocked the deadbolt, and twisted the knob. He opened the door and paused in the hallway light. For a second, he looked back at me. I wanted him to leave. I wanted the nightmare to walk out and never come back. I wanted to lock the door and pretend it hadn't happened. And also, I wanted to burn the whole apartment down and move to another state. The dog looked at me and spoke 2 words. Bad boy. Then he walked out into the hall and disappeared. I didn't move for a long time after that. I sat on my couch, shaking, staring at the open door like I couldn't trust my legs to carry me to it. When I finally got up, I locked everything and shoved a chair under the knob like that would matter. The next morning, my decent neighbor knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable, the way people look when they have bad news and they don't want it to be their job to deliver it. Hey, he said. Sorry, man. I stared at him. Sorry for what? He scratched his jaw. Your dog. I saw him this morning when I took out my trash. He got hit by a car. It was rough. My head felt light. What are you talking about? Your dog, dude, he said, like he couldn't believe I didn't understand. He was laid out on the road. Awful. You gotta be careful with doors. They bolt the second they get a chance. Shame, too. He seemed like such a good boy. He patted my shoulder like you do when you think someone is grieving, wished me a better day, and went back to his apartment. The moment his door shut, I ran outside. There was a dried puddle of blood on the road, dark and cracked like old paint. No body, no fur, no broken bones, nothing else. If a dog had died there, it wasn't there anymore. It's been a few weeks since then. Sometimes I swear I hear barking at night. Not close, not far, just somewhere in the building, like sound traveling through pipes. I keep waking up sweating, listening, trying to decide if it's real or my brain replaying fear. Eventually, I couldn't take it. I broke my lease and decided to crash at a friend's place until I could save enough for a different apartment far away. Somewhere with light. Somewhere with normal neighbors. Somewhere without a dumpster I know too well. I was carrying boxes down the hall to my buddy's car when my neighbor caught me by the stairwell. He had a small dog in his arms, something fluffy, maybe a Pomeranian mix. It trembled a little, eyes big, held tight against his chest. We made small talk, the kind you make when you don't know what else to say. He looked down at the dog and smiled sadly. "Found him behind the building," he said. "Felt bad for the little guy, so I brought him in." My skin went cold. "He must have been in a fight or something," my neighbor continued, scratching behind the dog's ear. "Left ear's gone, and there's a nasty gash on his back." The little dog looked up at me. Its tail wagged. Its tongue lolled out as it panted. And the sound it made wasn't normal panting. It sounded like soft snickering,